Let's get closer. Oh wow. This is just beautiful. Look at this. There's the, you know, when you, there's the big toe and the other 4 toes down to the small toe, down to the heel. What's fascinating about this is anybody that does a study of this will notice this piece sticking out here. It's like when you put your foot in mud and you pull it out, your toes will lift up a little mud where your toes were, and that's exactly what seems to have happened here. This rough granite is just, it's pulled up this overhang here. It's spectacular. And I see that people have been visiting here because they've been leaving little coins here, which is wonderful. Maybe just come closer and show this from more close up. Okay, well, I don't know who else has filmed this, but I think we'll put this up for everybody to see, for everyone to really appreciate this. Is a spectacular bit of human history. There were giants on Earth.
Chapter 10 verse 4, we are told that Og was the remnant of the giants. The book of Joshua tells of a tribe of giants.
For only Og king of Bashan remained of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man. Deuteronomy chapter 3 verse 11, in other words, Og was over 13 feet tall.
In Lebanon, 44 miles from Beirut, are the imposing ruins of Baalbek. There is mention of this place in the Old Testament, the Book of Kings. According to Arab tradition, the earliest temples here were created after the flood by a tribe of giants for the biblical king Nimrod.
Baalbek in particular is a very good example. That has the trilithon. Those are the largest stones in the world ever used for construction. They're so large we don't even know their actual weight. Those stones were somehow quarried, moved 5 miles, lifted 25-30 feet in the air, and placed together so closely that you can't fit a razor blade or a piece of paper in between them. We have no idea how they did it. We don't have a crane in the world that can lift weights anywhere near what those things are. The architects are that race, or those races, who built all the megaliths in the old world, the pyramids, Stonehenge. They are the people who walked before us, the ones who inhabited this world before we did. We have called them gods. We have sometimes called them giants. They left their handiwork behind, and we have not been able to duplicate it. We've only reached the point now where we can really appreciate it.
Mass graves of giants were opened. Some of the men 8 feet tall, some of the women 7 feet tall, some records of men 10 feet tall, and extremely large skulls. And extraordinarily, some of these skulls had horns, some had extra rows of teeth, some had other what we would call anomalies, but they were extraordinarily large skulls and extraordinarily large people.
A number of mounds in the Midwest in America were excavated starting in around 1850, and in many cases they would find skeletons of people who were in excess of 7 feet tall. And in many cases they had double rows of teeth, as well as, in some cases, 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot.
The one that was found in Bridal Veil Falls, California by a group of miners, first they found this wall with very intricate hieroglyphics. They assumed that they were finding gold behind the wall. They broke it down and they found this woman holding a child covered with fur and a strange kind of dust. The same tall female mummified remains have been found in Texas. They have been found in Death Valley. They have been found in other parts of California.
Archaeology at that time was in a heyday. There was everybody that had a shovel was out trying to find something. But what's interesting is that the finding of these giant mummified bodies and giant fossils and bones. Really, you can't pin to any particular location. They were finding them in Greece, they were finding them in Italy, they were finding them in the Middle East, they were finding them in America. And even if you write off a few of those as perhaps a hoax or a misinterpretation of something else, you're still left with a tremendous amount of evidence to show that there were these giant beings at some point walking the earth.
Now, one of the great mysteries of the West is what happened to these giants. There was nearly 60 skeletons brought out of this cave, but today they're nowhere to be found. Is it that there is some kind of archaeological cover-up that has occurred here? Something that concerns giants?
Well, the very term Nephilim comes out of actually the Bible, out of Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. It says, and there were giants, most translations say giants, in the earth in those days. And the Hebrew word there, the root word, is actually Nephil or Nephilim. And so that's where we get the terminology Nephilim. And as we study it on out, we find out exactly what they are, being divine beings, being the offspring of of angelic and human women, the offspring of them, called the Nephilim. Well, back in the time of Enos, back in about the third generation after Adam, we find out that idolatry started. And it started because we know from the book of Jubilees that God had sent watcher angels to the earth to help teach men and women about righteousness and justice. Sometime after that, there began to be a corruption when these angels began to see that the daughters of men were beautiful and they desired them. And from that point, these angels began to veil themselves towards idolatry and worship and began to bring knowledge to mankind that was seen to benefit mankind, but really was a corruption of the Word of God. So
right.
Then in the time of Jared, it says that actually then in Jared's time, which was not too far removed from Enos, it says that 200 watchers, according to the book of Enoch, came. They made an agreement that they were going to be cursed. They knew they were going to be cursed. They chose to leave their first estate and come into the earth and remain earthbound, and then to have human wives. Now what they did is they corrupted the creative knowledge of God, and so by doing so, they actually had, the men would actually want to give their daughters to them for marriage in exchange for corrupt knowledge. And so the wickedness came out of a corruption, a satanic corruption, to destroy, not to benefit the earth.
Wow.
A good question. The Bible is very clear that the flood was 100% effective, that it did kill all flesh. And in fact, that's what God said. He said, I'm going to, annihilate all flesh on the earth. And so that also is a good insight to the level of corruption that was there. And as you read the book, you're going to find out that every level of corruption was there. DNA manipulation of crops, animals, plants, fishes, half human, half angelic beings, all sorts of corrupted DNA things were there. And so God did indeed send the flood. Now we know from the historical books of Enoch and other books that these angels knew they were going to be destroyed. And so they asked not to be destroyed, but their verdict was they were without being able to be redeemed. So along comes the flood.
Right.
And just during that time of the flood, the 200 watchers that fell were chained in Tartarus, the Bible tells us. And then they watched their offspring die in the flood or actually battle one another and kill each other. Now this is what happens, and this is the very interesting thing. The Bible is very clear, the Bible itself is very clear, and even the historical books, that there's no redemption for a half-human or a half-angelic being. Because the Bible was written for Adam, right?
Right.
And for the generation and the race of Adam. So redemption is for mankind, not half man or half angel.
Right.
And so when the flood came, these Nephilim were disembodied, but yet they remained in eternal spirit because they were unredeemable.
So their flesh part of them was destroyed.
Yes.
But the spirit part of them
remained to wander.
Right.
Yeah, and so they became disembodied spirits. And so now we take that all the way forward in the New Testament, and we see that Jesus calls them unclean spirits. And so we know that there was no redemption. They just live eternally from generation to generation, always looking for a host to live and manifest their wickedness through. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, when the Gadarene demoniac that Jesus encountered, the demon was cast out, and if you noticed, it was a disembodied spirit, so it wanted another host.
Right.
So it chose to go into the pigs. Or you also see the account where Jesus said, well, if you cast a demon out of a person, then they go and they walk through dry and arid places until they can find another host, or they return back to the one that was cast out. So we can see that the disembodied spirits really are there, and they are the demons that are in the earth, and they're looking to bring the havoc of their Nephilim offspring, of the serpent seed, if you will, and to continue from generation to generation to generation.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, indeed, the record in the Bible, the Holy Scriptures of God, is very clear. There was Goliath and his brothers. There was Og, the king of Bashan, who we know had a 13-foot bed, I believe it was. And so that kind of gives you an idea of their stature and their size.
Now, these were human beings, though, right? Was Goliath a human being, or was he a spirit?
He was a Nephilim. He was an offspring, again, of the fallen watchers and a human woman. So he was human-looking, but it was actually a Nephilim. It was a hybrid, a crossbred.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why the distorted features and so forth. And so they were around, and there's lots of giants, as we find. There's over 20 races of giants in the Scriptures that you can find were there all over the earth at different times, and are indeed, I believe, here today. I believe they're in the United States. I believe they're in every country in the world, and there's evidence of that in many ways. You can go back to the museums and see the skeletons. You can go online and you can Google giants, and that's an amazing little venture there. But even in every state in the United States, there are evidences of giants that have been here in the States and overseas, and all the buildings, by the way, and the cities, like the cities of Bashan, the giant cities. There's huge cities that were made just for giants that are still in existence today. And so we know that they were then, and we know that they're now, but now they've taken on a little bit different appearance, because over time we find that the giants were killed, and they were easy targets, because you could say, okay, this is a Nephilim, look, they're a giant, or so forth. And so David and others, were very effective at taking them out. So they had to come up with a new plan.